Are there any arguments from the Christian fundamentalists that I would actually respect? Well, yeah, actually there are a few. The problem is you never use them. Stay tuned and I'll tell you what would cause me to have a reasonable debate with a Christian fundamentalist and why this never happens. So many Christian fundamentalists will ask me, why do I keep calling them cult members? When am I going to give them some sort of respect? And I've answered this many times in past videos. Half the reason this channel exists is because Christian fundamentalists couldn't leave well enough alone. In my course of 50-some years, I've had many occasions where Christian fundamentalists tried to interfere with my life and belief systems. Their church even took away a girlfriend of mine. This intrusion of your philosophy and beliefs has happened in the workplace, the social place, and any other place that the Christian fundamentalist is present, because deep down you believe it is your job to try to convert others. So after many decades of dealing with this, I decided to start hitting back and going through your beliefs one by one and debunking them, because I do want to help deconvert members of your cult. And no, I do not respect irrational beliefs based on anti-reason, especially when I know you're brainwashing your children, which is going to hurt them later in life, not only socially, but possibly career-wise, because you're going to be reluctant to become an engineer if you don't believe in all that science stuff. So when will I start respecting you? When you start presenting logical arguments. I'm okay with somebody presenting an argument that can't be proven. I'm an unspecified theist, which means I believe in a higher power. I'm probably closer to a Jew than anything else. I wouldn't be a good Jew because I don't believe in many of the events of the Torah, but I'm far closer to that philosophy of thought than I am with any of the Christian beliefs. And I never claim to have contentions based on evidence. You're not going to see me call the atheist experience, try to present why I think there's a higher power, because I know they can instantly dissolve my argument with 2 words. Prove it. And I can't, and I don't try to pretend that I can. But I have some basis of thought behind my arguments, and some sort of rational reason, while knowing it is only a hopeful maybe. But your arguments are not rational. They're not in the realm of logic or reason. Everybody seems to know that the Christian fundamentalist is a cult member, except the Christian fundamentalist. And if you want people to stop thinking that, then learn to present better affirmations for your faith. First, I'm going to give you your contentions you need to stop saying, and then I'm going to tell you some good arguments you could use if you want to earn at least a semblance of respect from us skeptics. First, stop telling us the Old Testament is legitimate. Stop telling us the Bible is literal in the Old Testament. Stop saying the world was created between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago. Stop saying that Adam and Eve were the first people on earth and that they were tricked by a talking serpent, which caused the fall of man. And stop talking about a global flood. All evidence from every genre of science not only says you're wrong, but you're emphatically wrong. We know that there wasn't an Adam and Eve who lived to be 1,000 years old. We know from the vast array of sciences that the earth is not 5,000 to 10,000 years old. We know from science as well as historical archaeology that there was no great flood. We know that many of these stories were adopted from Sumerian texts. And this leads to my next point. Stop saying that you have scientists that confirm that Genesis is legitimate. Yes, Henry Morris from the Institute of Creation Research was an engineer. Yes, John Baumgartner was a geophysicist, and John Sanford was also in the biological sciences. But you can be a scientist and disregard science if you are a member of a cult. Henry Morris stated in a debate with Ken Miller that there were no transitional fossils, after which Ken Miller showed him not one but a few slides of transitional fossils. What did Henry Morris say afterward? After he was presented with these slides showing he was wrong, he just repeated there are no transitional fossils. There's a highly educated engineer who disregards reality when it's right in front of him, because that is where somebody belongs to a cult. John Baumgartner, John Sanford have been completely debunked by the entire scientific community. John Baumgartner's own research, with his theory of runaway subduction on how the continents moved across the Earth in 40 days, was debunked by his own data showing that the coefficient of friction of these continents moving would have caused enough heat to boil the oceans. When he was confronted with this actual mathematical certainty, he would not respond because he is a cult member. you don't have any scientific validity whatsoever that proves the legitimacy of Genesis. But if you want to keep saying that, I'm going to keep calling you a cult member. And stop telling us about the legitimacy of the Exodus of Moses, which would have equated to approximately 2 million people wandering in the desert for 40 years. There's no Egyptian historical evidence that says the ancient Hebrews were slaves. There's no archaeological evidence in this wilderness that showed that many people wandered for 40 years. There is nothing you have that backs this up, including your Patterns of Evidence series, which I debunked in an extended playlist as well. If you're going to keep repeating this sort of nonsense, you're not going to be treated with respect by me. But let's just move right to the New Testament. Stop saying there was 500 witness accounts to the resurrection of Christ. The scholars think at best that the earliest writings were 30 to 40 years after the fact, and we don't have pieces of these copies until somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd century. There is no authorship of witness to the resurrection of Christ, the miracles of Christ, or the divinity of Christ. The fact is, we have no idea what the apostles thought because they never wrote anything down. Neither did their friends, enemies, Pharisees, Jews, Romans, or any neighbor down the street. No one signed, "I knew Christ, I witnessed this," signed person who knew Christ. And stop saying outside sources confirm the legitimacy of Yeshua's divinity. Outside sources such as Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, and Josephus only acknowledge that there was a Jesus Christ, he had a following, and many were martyred in his name. None of them say they believe that he was divine, minus the texts that are pretty much known to be altered by later historians of the early church. Here would be some more suitable and logical arguments when debating us skeptics. You could talk about this wondrous world and the amazing synchronicity in which it operates. You could talk alone about the human eye and how it operates in such precision that there had to have been a higher power to create it. It wouldn't be proof, mind you. I wouldn't call the atheist experience with this contention, but at least it's somewhat of a reasoning argument. You could talk about the flux between good and evil in the world, why people like Hitler developed, Vladimir Putin, and all the other tyrants that wreak havoc on the human race, and how there is this constant struggle to be free from tyranny. And you can break this down even into your day-to-day. You could talk about how it's easier to go into the path of dishonesty versus righteousness, and how this seems to be a trait of man since the beginning of time. Matt Dillahunty would just argue that that's just evolution of morals, but at least you're in the realm of reason with this argument. I'm not going to laugh you out of the room with that versus telling me there was a talking snake who tricked Eve into causing the downfall of man. You could use Herbert Spencer's argument that we can't comprehend the infinite. We can't comprehend time and space beginning, and we can't comprehend it ending. It is a total mind bender for us mortal minds. And you could then conclude that only a superior mindset could understand it, thus giving an inclination to God. It wouldn't be proof. I'm not going to try to convince my atheist subscribers with this, but at least you have some sort of rational thinking. Now, there's a few arguments you could use if you wanted me to treat you with some sort of respect, but you're not using those. You're telling me the universe and all its side dishes were created in 6 days. You're telling me you have proof of the resurrection when you don't. You're telling me there's witnesses when there aren't. You're telling me of a mass Hebrew exodus, which we have thoroughly shown couldn't have happened, historically and archaeologically. But Christian Fundamentalist, if you're going to continue to say that the Bible is the literal Word of God and not understanding things like the Old Testament was a myriad of fables from other cultures that were intermixed with Hebrew culture, and if you're going to continue to propagate complete untruths about the New Testament, demanding that I accept things as evidence that are really bad speculation, then don't expect me to call you anything except the cult member that you are. Now, if you'd like some more material on Christian fundamentalist cults, check out my playlist card at the end of the video, and check out my own tale, which at least I admit is fiction, The Second Fall, an offbeat apocalypse sure to offend the evangelical and probably a few others. Link is in the video description as well as the banner on the home channel page, and I will see you next time as we once again take that sword of reason and reality and thrust it right through the heart of ignorance.